My abiding memory is the particular account that was in a statement that I read of what had been a little boy. He described what happened when Savile would come round. If the kids were playing in the street, they would just all bomb burst because they'd been told by their mothers, if the roller turns up, you come in straight away. And this lad had been caught out, and he was terrified, he was frightened. He'd run and hidden. He then gets this whiff of cigar smoke and realises that he's been seen. There was just something about how clearly the fear was still present in what was a middle-aged man. It was the fear that was instilled by the anticipation of what could happen.
And what did happen?
He was raped.
In 2011, thousands of fans mourned the loss of Sir Jimmy Savile, who was once celebrated in footage like this as one of Britain's biggest stars. Just months later, exposed as one of the UK's most prolific sex offenders, his memorial stone was removed. He now lies buried in an unmarked grave. But a decade on, how much do we know about what Savile really was?
In my opinion, Savile was a high-functioning psychopath, and having dealt with hundreds of sexual offenders during my career, he was definitely one of the most dangerous and prolific offenders I'd ever come across.
Attack from the off here. Goodness gracious. Welcome indeed to Top of the Pops. I got an atom here.
I first went to Top of the Pops when I was about 14 and a half. And when we were all just talking and laughing, he suddenly, Jimmy Savile, started to put his hand up my dress.
He'd strut around with his heavies and just nose in the air, looking like the king. He was menacing. He could do anything he wanted.
How did Savile persuade those who should have known better to give him their seal of approval? To allow him to use his TV appearances to further court the establishment.
Hello, welcome.
And even to make him the face of child protection. And the closer he got to power, the more untouchable he became.
He could get into parties at Buckingham Palace. He could wander at will around St James's Palace, where Charles had his office. And he would walk in and drift around Diana's apartment to come and see her, something that he clearly had easy access.
Analysing his many TV appearances and using new testimony from victims, witnesses, and a leading detective who investigated Savile after his death, this film examines the strategies he used throughout his career of abuse.
Everybody thinks they know the story because they're now aware of his offending, but the reality is that he was an abuser first and a celebrity second. By understanding how he could get into so many organisations, how he could operate in so many different environments and still get away with it, that's the story that needs to be told.
This afternoon, just how seriously the police are taking claims of abuse at the hands of Jimmy Savile came into shock. Abuse on an almost industrial scale.
The Metropolitan Police say that it will now take the lead in investigating sex abuse allegations.
In 2012, a Metropolitan Police unit was set up in East London to investigate Savile's crimes following claims made in an ITV documentary after his death. Detectives were inundated with harrowing new allegations from the start.
In the early weeks, it was really quite overwhelming. It was incredibly shocking, and it just continued on day after day after day.
Gradually, Gary and his team began to piece together a picture of how Savile had operated. Although celebrated for his voluntary work and the flattering TV coverage that went with it, detectives began to uncover a more sinister side to his apparent altruism.
You just need to look at every decision and move that he made and look at it through the fact that he was motivated to give him the opportunity to offend.
A former minor, Savile's professional career took off when he DJ'd in the dance halls of Manchester and Leeds in the 1950s.
Where were you going to find young girls? They were all going to the social dances at the dance halls. So the first place he goes is there. He gets his job there, that's his first career.
Savile carefully controlled which girls were admitted to his dances and took advantage of them later.
I was born and brought up near Leeds, and Jimmy Savile was well known as a club organiser, MC, front of house manager. I heard stories about how he very much controlled who was let in and who wasn't let in to his clubs. And in hindsight, I wondered if that's when it all started.
To help him deal with potential troublemakers, Savile also deliberately courted local criminals. One was Bill Benny, a feared Manchester hard man.
I think Savile's time in the clubs in the 50s and 60s and his association with Bill Benny was really like an apprenticeship. He was a student, without a doubt.
Savile later recalled how he once ordered his doormen to make an example of one nuisance. He reminisced. They went outside and kicked his head in. They left him lying there concussed. When I ran a dance hall, I ruled it with a rod of iron.
He was learning a lot of important lessons in terms of control and coercion in order to hone and refine his ability to exploit weakness. This would put him in good stead for his next step.
The popularity of Savile's dancehall sessions led him to being offered a show on Radio Luxembourg in 1958. His high-rating radio show caught the attention of producers at the biggest broadcaster of all.
I think the BBC in the 60s could suddenly see youth culture coming along, the Beatles, pop music, and they didn't have any way of dealing with that. They needed an intermediary. And Jimmy Savile became that intermediary.
Very good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome indeed to Top of the Pops. And how are you this evening?
Excited by his appeal, the BBC unleashed Savile on a young TV audience, unwittingly starting a pattern of offending which would last for decades.
His professional career went hand in hand with his criminal career, and particularly with Top of the Pops, because there was very ready and regular access to young people there, and in a way that appears to have been, if I was being generous, say lightly regulated.
By the 70s, Top of the Pops was achieving audiences of up to 15 million.
Lots of nice young ladies about with us this evening, and lots of nice records we've got. So
Savile was seen as crucial to the series' success, and he knew it.
what's the name of the group?
Ian Hampton played bass with the band Sparks, who with their distinctive performances appeared 15 times on the show in the mid-70s. Hampton, speaking here for the first time, saw a more sinister side to Savile behind the jokey TV facade.
Jimmy Savile would actually be there when he wasn't even DJing or introducing people. He'd strut around with his heavies and just nose in the air, looking like the king. He was menacing. He was always menacing. He could do anything he wanted.
At times, Savile treated Top of the Pops as if it was one of his old nightclubs.
I think he regarded Top of the Pops as a happy hunting ground.
Hunting ground for?
Young ladies.
See, I'm not quite sure. Let's have a look at your muscles. Yeah. I'll tell you what, meanwhile...
On one occasion, I was on Top of the Pops. Savile disappeared with a young girl to a dressing room. A few minutes later, she returned looking absolutely shaken. After I saw this, I went to a producer on the night and I said to him, "What's going on with Savile?" And he shrugged me off. He said, "Don't be ridiculous." And that was it. That's the response I got from the producer and a couple of other DJs.
Well, you mentioned it to other DJs?
Yeah.
And what did they say?
They shrugged it off as well. I think they were in awe of Savile, or in terror, you know. He was a very threatening person.
Savile also exerted his influence in more subtle ways.
Now, I'm going to tell you a secret. The cameraman taking my picture now, when he's not actually taking pictures for transmission, he focuses on the young lady's legs and he has a private view all of his own. Isn't that naughty?
He had normalised abnormal behaviour to the point where it wasn't considered a problem, that it wasn't considered important. And this is part of the grooming of the environment.
Savile was becoming confident enough to abuse openly.
We were all ushered in, and then I saw Jimmy Savile coming out. All of a sudden I saw him pointing to me, but they made me sit on this step. I couldn't even jump down at the edge because it was too high.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Top of the Pops.
All of a sudden Jimmy Savile turned up. He didn't say anything, I could feel somebody moving their hands towards me, and I moved out the way, but then all of a sudden it seemed to just go underneath me and started fiddling, and that was it. I got a shock, and I tried to jump up and move out the way.
I'll tell you something. The fella could get used to all this, as it happened to you, he could get used to it.
His hand wouldn't go away, and I was trying to move it, but I'll tell you what, his hand was rock solid, and it would not move. It would not move, and I was getting embarrassed because I couldn't shift it out the way, and I was getting shifted, you know what I mean? His hand just kept moving. When the camera went back, it was closing, so we could get off, and I went down and told the man that was next to the cameraman with the headphones. When I told him what he'd done, he told me to get lost. Ushered me off and said, you know, go, go, go. He said, "That's just Jimmy Savile."
I've got my mouse-type leaning post here. Boo.
By the 70s, Savile's profile on Top of the Pops had given him the confidence to abuse young girls without being questioned. He also had the opportunity. The minimum audience age was supposedly 15, but this wasn't strictly enforced.
Some of these young ladies were clearly well underage, 12, 13, 14. I don't know if the parents even were aware that they were there. I don't think they'd have been happy if they were.
Child actor Kelly Gold was a regular audience member on the show at the start of the 70s. She speaks here about her experiences for the first time on television.
I first went to Top of the Pops when I was about 14 and a half, and then I went 8 to 10 times over a period of a few months. I'd turn up in my school uniform, and we would change in the toilet area, and we would put on our makeup and our high heels or our boots or our hot pants. BBC staff and higher management were in the bars. They were allowing 14 and 15-year-olds to go to the BBC bar, which I did myself, and we were being plied with champagne. It was a delight to be given champagne. You're 15, you know, you don't drink.
When you've taken those girls away from that arena and then moved them into a private area of the BBC, you know, for example, the bar, why are they there? The fact that they're drinking alcohol is one thing, but the fact is why are they there? Well, for what purpose?
From the bar area, Kelly would then be moved to the studio.
And this one here is a Frenchie, and this one here is a Scottie.
During the filming of Top of the Pops, the floor managers would have a word with you and ask you to come up onto the floor.
Well, I said to our excellent floor manager, Mr. down there, I said, bring me a young lady to keep me company, and this is his choice, you'll see, because at number...
If you made the top table, so to speak, then there was a good chance you would be asked to go to one of the dressing rooms.
What would they say?
Jimmy Savile requires you in his dressing room. There was a daybed in the dressing room. And inside, a lot went on. Drinking, exploiting girls, touching. People don't realise behind the scenes there was grooming going on. And Jimmy Savile was the main instigator of the grooming. I was invited to go to his dressing room. And when I got there, there was another couple of girls and Jimmy Savile. And we were given a glass of champagne. And when we were all just talking and laughing, Jimmy Savile started to put his hand up my dress. And I immediately, very quick reaction, swiped it away. I soon then left the dressing room, never to be invited back.
Getting the pushback immediately was a signal that it was probably more trouble than it was worth. He looked for compliant individuals and those that would not make a fuss. With many offenders, they have an unerring ability to pick up on the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of individuals.
Claire was adopted. She told me that. She always wondered why her mother had given her away as a baby, that she didn't love her enough. So maybe when you are shown affection by an adult, you crave it.
In 1971, 15-year-old Claire McAlpine was a Top of the Pops audience regular, coming into contact with celebrities there, among them Savile. She became good friends with Kelly.
What I liked about Claire, she was quite amusing. She was a lovely dancer and she was fun to be with. Claire had started to go back to the dressing room of Jimmy Savile. She went quite a few times to the dressing room. And then the next time I saw her again at Top of the Pops, she was rather upset. She thought she might be pregnant. Now, being pregnant to who? Was it Jimmy Savile? Maybe. But Claire was worried that she was quite a few weeks late. And then the next time I was aware of Claire was when I read it in the News of the World that she had killed herself. And there was a picture of myself on the stage, Claire alongside Jimmy Savile. He looks like he's holding her hand there. Oh, I think he is. Never noticed that before. Well, I cried. I cried for my friend to think that she had felt there was no way out. I was terribly upset. I was very sad. And I never went to Top of the Pops again.
Following a short inquest, it emerged that before her daughter's death, Claire's mother had complained to the BBC that a celebrity had seduced Claire after she attended Top of the Pops. The celebrity denied the allegation. But, as with complaints about Savile, it was inadequately investigated.
You know, I don't see anything that has come out from what happened that would really lead me to believe that they really understood what went wrong, and they really understood the depths of how outrageous it was.
Though the Top of the Pops audience age was later raised to 16, Savile's abuse continued throughout his time on the series.
You know, I think there were a lot of missed opportunities to stop Savile much earlier.
He was so popular with the British public that the BBC couldn't afford to lose him and were prepared to turn a blind eye to all manner of things in order to keep him there. He was their cash cow in many ways.
By the 70s, Savile was in his mid-40s, and as this performance showed, was looking out of place as the BBC's face of youth.
He'd become really quite a bit older than certainly most of the acts on Top of the Pops, and I think that could have become more and more apparent.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome indeed to Jimmo Fix It.
Once again, Savile adapted. Based partly on his idea, the BBC gave him his own primetime show aimed at a family audience. Jim'll Fix It.
He then transitions to the Jim'll Fix It figure, where he then becomes a father figure in a suit, sitting in a big armchair.
Can you say stethoscope?
He was still in the position that he could have access and opportunity to offend against young people. And I think that was probably deliberate and a thought-through strategy.
Savile had now become a respectable family entertainer. The persona he created helped him to become the face of public information campaigns.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 10 vital minutes, all about kids.
Lucrative commercials.
Away day is an off-peak ticket.
And of course, charity fundraising, often giving him further access to young people.
As a very special guest, Jimmy Savile's there to see the things done.
One strategy he employed during the peak period of his abuse was simple but effective.
One thing that struck me clearly was how compartmentalised his life was, that we could see that there were pockets of offences in many different parts of the country and that they weren't connected. And then you start to think, well, why was that the case? And, you know, rather like terrorist cells, that you don't provide all your information to more than one so that it can't overlap. If we look back at the time that these offences were being committed, there was really no overlap in the police intelligence. He was just somebody who was very difficult to keep track of.
In an interview in 1991, Savile was frank about his nomadic lifestyle, but gave no hint of the sinister motives behind it.
And you move quite a bit around. You're a mobile man. You don't put down roots necessarily.
No, not really.
No.
No,
you don't
not
carry
really.
much baggage.
No, I've got a shoulder bag that's not been unpacked for nearly 30 years. It's a different bag when it wears out, but I mean, I never unpack completely anything anywhere because I don't usually sleep in the same bed more than 2 nights running because there's no point in it. I wander around like I sail the country.
He also deliberately used a variety of caravans or mobile homes. One he nicknamed the Hustler.
The smaller you can make the space that you are at most vulnerability and risk, the better. And so he carried his own environment to abuse around with him wherever he went. You can narrow down the possibilities to be detected. And of course, he even got the BBC to pay for it by saying, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a programme called Savile's Travels.
This became a successful BBC Radio 1 programme spanning the late 60s and early 70s. Again, it was based on Savile's idea.
Here we are back home again with today's edition of Savile's Travels.
Savile took his mobile home on tour for the series, but would also regularly keep it in BBC car parks.
When I was working there, it was very much a case of everybody knew about it, but nobody knew what to do about it. I think a blind eye was turned. And I was invited to a meeting with Jimmy Savile, and I don't know what provoked him to say this, but he just turned around and bragged to me that he'd had 3 14-year-old girls in his trailer that morning. And when he said had, he meant in the sexual sense, I'm sure, because he put the emphasis on the word had. And I just found that appalling. And I said to him, I said, well, you know, why are you bragging about that? nothing to be proud of. Oh, he said, you don't understand. He said, you know, I've got to deal with the man upstairs. By the man upstairs, he meant God. He said, because I do so much for charity and all the good work I do, he turns a blind eye to my indiscretions. I went through the motions of sitting in on the meeting, and then at the end of it, I said, no way do I want to work on a programme with him. My whole reason for not taking things further was I had no evidence and I didn't know anybody who had.
What Savile had referred to as good work often simply provided him further opportunities to offend. And by now, he had taken steps to protect himself by reaching to the very top of the British establishment. In the 70s and 80s, Savile's influence in the NHS grew. Already a volunteer at Leeds General Infirmary, he became a prominent figure in other hospitals, including Broadmoor. His growing profile as a supporter of good causes, protecting him from suspicion.
People have said to me, here, what about all this hospital work? Surely this has to be a publicity gimmick.
5 minutes in a hospital is a gimmick. If you've got the newspapers there, if you've got the television there, 5 minutes is a gimmick. 5 years, it's not a gimmick.
Savile even had his own bedroom on site at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, which houses the National Spinal Injury Centre. He also had unsupervised access to the wards.
You're always here, you're saying you do such a lot for us.
Savile's relationship with hospitals was particularly concerning because of the vulnerability of the people that he preyed upon. Often offenders will have barriers to committing offences, and it appeared in Savile's case that nearly all of those had been removed.
I didn't know or hadn't heard of him. They said he raised so much money for them to build this National Spinal Cord Injury Centre, and everyone knew about it.
In the early 90s, Pauline was being treated at Stoke Mandeville for a rare disease that left her paralysed from the waist down.
The first time I met him was on the basketball field. I wheeled my wheelchair on the side and just sat and watched. He came round and said, "Who have we got?" And I said, "Oh, my name is Pauline," and we shook hands. Then, coming back, Jimmy Savile came behind me and rested his 2 hands on my shoulders. It was comforting, so I thought, how kind.
It's quite common with abusers that they will use non-intimate contact with somebody that they've picked out to gauge the reaction, particularly in a public setting.
20 or 30 minutes later, I was just sitting on my wheelchair, and he just came in and bent down. The next thing I knew, it was Jimmy Savile had put his hand up my skirt into my pants. I couldn't scream. I just froze, shaking. He looked at me, was looking straight at my eyes and smiling. Then Jimmy Savile put his fingers inside me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me died. I started crying because I couldn't really tell anyone. Remember, everyone thinks this man is a God-sent angel. And then I started blaming myself. I said it was my fault.
The story of Jimmy Savile's offending in NHS hospitals is unusual to the point of being scarcely credible.
Kate Lampard investigated Savile's abuse on NHS premises after his death. There were 60 victims relating to Stoke Mandeville alone.
I asked myself often whether or not he was seizing opportunities or whether he had, in a calculated way, set up those opportunities. on balance, I came to the view that he was a very calculating individual who takes that opportunity to abuse a huge number of people and to wreck their lives. I mean, many of these were young children. It's a pretty terrible story.
Why do you think that people might have been afraid to challenge his behaviour?
People probably felt they weren't necessarily going to believe them. And if it came to it, they'd be more likely to believe him.
Savile did not rely on his celebrity alone for protection. Instead, he took further steps to ensure his word would carry even more weight. Ramblers explore the vandalised remains of a cottage in Glencoe in the Scottish Highlands. The property once belonged to Jimmy Savile. Back in 1999, another visitor to the site was the heir to the throne.
Savile had this place, one of his many bolt holes that he had dotted around the country. And Charles paying homage to Jimmy Savile at his home in Glencoe. It was an utterly bizarre situation. Savile had these women dressed up in waitress pinafores to serve them tea.
There's no suggestion that Prince Charles or his staff were aware of Savile's offending. But Charles's willingness to take part in this publicity stunt was proof of how successfully Savile had manipulated him over many years.
I think that Savile's relationships with the establishment was designed for a purpose. The royal family gave him a veneer of respectability that he maybe wouldn't have been able to have achieved otherwise. He didn't appear to be some cartoon character anymore.
Savile was very bright in that he very carefully built protection for himself to carry on doing what he did. He deliberately constructed a roof above his head which protected him from the consequences. With his abuse, he became almost untouchable, because if you attacked him, you'd be attacking the people around him.
Savile jumped on the bandwagon of charities and being seen alongside royalty, and not just royalty, government ministers, the Prime Minister of the day, Margaret Thatcher. He latched onto anybody and everybody whom he could use to his own benefit that would hide the dark secrets that he was keeping.
The then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher saw nothing but good in Savile, as her appearance on Jim'll Fix It showed.
Can I thank you for everything you do?
And she wanted to reward him with a knighthood. This was blocked in the early 80s by civil servants, in part because Savile had boasted of sleeping with girls during charity runs. In the meantime, Savile painstakingly worked on his relationship with Prince Charles, first through his charity work, and then more informally.
At the time, Charles was gullible. I mean, I'm saying with hindsight, he was gullible. At the time, he was gullible, as was everybody else.
Astonishingly, Savile began to involve himself in the royal couple's personal affairs.
He inserted himself into their marriage in the way that he was someone who made himself available. And Charles liked having him around. He would turn up, Diana told me, at Kensington Palace, where she lived, uninvited, and would manage to persuade the police on the gate, who never let anyone in without an invitation, to walk in. She said he would sort of come and say, well, I'm just here just to check up on you. And she said that Charles used to sort of quip if there was a problem that needed sorting out, they get Jimmy to do it because Jim will fix it. I think she found it slightly unnerving.
Once again, those with suspicions felt powerless to challenge him.
I always had my doubts about him. I just didn't like the man. I thought he was ghastly. He would go into the office, in the summer in particular, where you've got secretaries there who are doing correspondence. They're wearing a sleeveless dress, and he would take their hand and kiss their hand and run his lips right up their arms, which is pretty unsavory.
This was something that he even carried out on Princess Diana. He licked Princess Diana's hand, and she recoiled from that. As she told me, it was something very creepy.
I did voice it at the time, saying, it's not really on. And I did say, that man is dreadful. But he was pretty well established in government circles with prime ministers of the day. And by being pretty well established, he was fairly untouchable.
In 1990, despite the resistance from Whitehall, Savile was given a knighthood. He'd finally got what he wanted.
Prince Charles marked Jimmy Savile's 80th birthday with an extraordinary gift and an even more extraordinary letter. The gift was a box of Cohiba cigars. But then he encloses with this box of cigars and a pair of personal cufflinks for Jimmy, a note in which he sort of eulogizes Savile.
Charles reportedly wrote, "Nobody will ever know what you have done for this country, Jimmy. This is to go some way in thanking you for that." The Prince's office declined to comment for this programme.
Jimmy Savile was getting protection, massive protection. If you're a friend of the royal family, a chief constable is going to think twice about putting a team on an investigation of you.
In fact, Savile was formally interviewed by police on just one occasion, but the case was dropped. In the end, it was left to victims from this approved girls' school in Surrey to finally help expose him.
A documentary on ITV1 this week will feature 5 women who claim they were abused by the TV presenter as teenagers in the 1970s.
Savile was never exposed for his abuse during his lifetime, but a year after his death, 5 victims spoke out on an ITV exposure documentary. 2 were from Duncroft School in Surrey, an approved institution for vulnerable and troubled young women that Savile visited regularly in the 1970s.
We know he stayed overnight there. A number of girls at the time subsequently came forward and said they were abused by him. And very quickly, really, that became a door that opened up into his whole world.
Myron Jones was the first journalist to uncover Savile's abuse at the school for a BBC investigation a year before that was never aired. Jones was helped by Rochelle Shepherd, a former Duncroft pupil who crucially had shared messages about Savile on a social media website after his death.
At Duncroft, it was always rumours because there was a lot of privacy, strangely enough, with the girls. So it was only after his death, really, that I became aware of the extent of his abuse, because I was part of a group called Friends United, and I kept in touch with some of the girls. And I did do some research at that point.
With Shepherd's help, Jones discovered Savile had abused girls, often in return for visits to BBC Television Centre. It was evidence again of how his career and offending went hand in hand.
You look at his pattern of activity, his MO, again and again, he targets particular institutions which give him a particular chance. Institutions where there is access to young girls, institutions that will be in his debt, and institutions where allegations will not be believed because of the nature of the people there.
It later emerged that Surrey police had received complaints about his abuse at Duncroft, and that Savile was interviewed about these in 2009. He denied everything.
I did find out that he was reported to the police, but nothing was ever done about it. So this was a shock. This was quite unbelievable that, you know, the police were aware that things had gone on, but they didn't really act on any of this.
The Crown Prosecution Service decided not to prosecute Savile because complainants were allegedly unwilling to give evidence. But the police's interview methods were flawed.
Victims thought they were the only person talking to the police, and it was treated in that way, rather than putting evidence of a number of people together. They picked them off one by one.
Potential victims are now informed if others have also complained. The charities who had run Duncroft at the time said they were shocked and saddened at the findings of abuse.
It's just a bloody shame that he had to die first before any of this was exposed. And that always puzzles me, is that he was able to get away with it for so long. It's incredible, really. It's incredible.
Once revealed, the scale of Savile's abuse created a sense of national crisis. Alongside the police's Operation Yewtree, investigations were launched at the institutions where he had abused for so long, most notably the BBC and the NHS.
Managers did not acknowledge that they knew. What they did accept was that there was gossip and innuendo. If that was the case, why did they not act on that? Sort of sense of shock, really, that sensible people had allowed this to happen over a very, very long period of time. They stopped seeing what was before their eyes.
This report makes sorry reading for the BBC.
It was a similar story at the BBC. An independent inquiry headed by Dame Janet Smith found no evidence that senior staff were aware of his conduct. But it concluded the BBC's culture had allowed him to go undetected, missing numerous opportunities to stop him.
It was plainly concerned about its reputation.
And, devastatingly, that it appeared to have been more concerned about its reputation than in focusing on protecting vulnerable young audiences.
That there were young girls who might be exposed to moral danger on top of the pops.
The revelations about Savile have transformed many aspects of child protection. There are now more stringent safeguarding protocols throughout society. Victims are now more likely to be believed. But are these enough to prevent another Savile, a serial offender who roamed the country from institution to institution?
There was a number of inquiries that were raised for all sorts of organisations involved. They were all looking at what went on in their own organisation, rather than the focus being Savile. And so what didn't happen was a coordinated and clear picture of what he had done himself in order to be able to offend with impunity for so long. The conditions, the processes and the guidance and the safeguarding are stronger. But there will always be people who think that they can get away with the things that he got away with in their own environment.
Unless you confront what happened and how it happened, you can't take measures to stop it happening in the future. And that is the real problem here, that it's still possible for abusers to abuse and for their bosses or the people in charge of them to turn a blind eye or just give them a nice reference that they get sent somewhere else.
10 years on from his death, the actions of one of Britain's most prolific sex offenders still casts a long shadow. Nowhere more than for those he abused.
This was somebody who had had a catastrophic effect on potentially, hundreds and hundreds of people's lives. And it's really important that we don't just sweep it under the carpet as an aberration. Savile was a prolific, predatory sexual offender. And all the things that he did in order to be able to get away with it for as long as he did are the things that are still out there in society in different forms.
To be honest, I wasn't the same from that day. It means that I wasn't able to feel anyone's love because I didn't want them touching me. I'm still dealing with the anger. If only people around him must know what Jimmy Savile was doing. Surely if they'd said something, maybe they could have stopped fewer of us going through what we went through.
I don't think justice has been done for Claire. She would have made, I think, a fabulous actress had she gone on and lived. She would be someone we would know the name today, Claire McAlpine. She never got that chance.